Welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, a show about art, politics, culture, etc., all with a true right Nordic perspective, as always. And hopefully, I have triggered some deep memories for some people in the audience with that intro. Um, I found it online and I liked it, and I realized it's from World of Warcraft, actually. And I put it together with the Nighthawks image or painting. Sorry, Luddic Path. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be back again as usual. We were originally going to have an episode called Lawfare for Reactionaries, where we had one of the gentlemen we met at the Skildings event, who is a lawyer who has a Substack and some information about how reactionaries and people in our sphere should approach law, both locally and more on the national level. But unfortunately, because of the scheduling problems, we had to do like an impromptu AMA. But of course, as long as the demand is there,
Sure, but I also titled this political strategy. It's maybe not 100% a correct title. It's more a bit of a grab bag of minor issues that we either wanted to bring up or maybe some we've been discussing privately. So we figured, like, why just we'll do the AMA and we'll do minor topics and just make an episode out of it.
Yes, I mean, ideally, I want to have episodes where we have some meat on the bone and some actual quality information along with the entertainment. But this time we're just going to have like shit contrarian takes.
Entertainment only.
Yes, we're going to antagonize people in our own spheres for clout.
This is the Blood Sports episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do like shitty takes. So let's go.
Yeah. So I'm trying the feature on YouTube here, which lets me do like an ask us anything section. So in the chat there should be like a dedicated question section for anyone who's interested. Otherwise you can just post it in the chat. If you're a member of our Element channel, you can post the question there and I will prioritize those. If you want to join the Longhouse Element channel, that's basically Discord, but for people who want to be a bit more secure in their communication, let's put it that way. The link is down in the description below. It's very easy and it takes about 5 minutes to sign up. Falling outside the normal moral constraints. Sorry, stumbling over my words here. For $5 US says, thanks for the King of the Hill stream. That was one of the best YouTube listens I've had in a long time. You should do Silicon Valley too. Man, I'd love to do Silicon Valley because that's one of my favorite modern sort of comedy shows that I can sort of remember. Have you seen Silicon Valley, Luddic?
Yes. Yeah, I loved it actually. We can easily do that one. Now that we know there's a demand, we can just keep doing all the Mike Judge properties to pad out the content, so I don't have to read any books. But yeah, thanks for the super chat. I mean, I saw a lot of positive feedback on the in the comments as well as on the Clips channel with the is Hank Hill based video where there's a surprising amount of people who checked that one out. I think it's like 80% of the people who came in were not subscribed. So
yeah, something like
probably
that,
not familiar with the show. And of course, we get a lot more shit in the Clips channel because you get more normies coming in. But it's kind of the point. We trying to expose the show to some people who aren't in our spheres already.
Of course, and as we made fun of, during the stream as well. One random Indian guy managed to stumble in through the YouTube algorithm and was very confused at where he had ended up.
That sounds great. Do like YouTube Safari or something. We just end up in streams.
With a question, or do you want to start with, I don't know, fighting about ideology or tomboy abs?
Do we have a lot of questions already?
I have some questions that have been asked in advance, actually.
Okay,
so we can start on those.
I don't know. Maybe I think we should. Yeah, okay. Let's look at some questions, and then we can jump on to the other things.
Actually,
we
can use one of these. We can use one of these to jumpstart one of the conversations, maybe. And that this is a question from the Element channel, so I'm going to just have to read it out. Unless maybe I can do like, no, that's not going to work. Is there any strategy that we typically associate with the left, in air quotes, that the dissident right can use? I've heard that this is impossible or that it flat out won't work, mostly from the NRX crowd.
Yeah, I've heard that as well because I listen to a lot of distributist and Moldbug and so on. I mean, Moldbug has the idea that like the left represents entropy, right? And leftism is like, you know, you're adding rust onto a machine, just continuously adding more and more rust with entropy.
And
Whereas
it's hard not to agree with that assessment, looking at, you know, the effects of leftism upon modern society. But I mean, then you get into like a mire of, you know, what is leftism and what isn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite confusing. Most people don't use like the definition of leftism that Moldbug uses, right? There is a lot of a lot of pre-assumptions in terms of what is on the left and what is on the right. I mean, for most people would not recognize that the definition that he has.
Right.
But let's think about what are leftist political strategies, and we could maybe try to iterate over them and see.
I would say that the reason a lot of people, you know, just as a general observation, the reason that a lot of people say that we can't use quote unquote leftist tactics is simply because we don't have the power to do it. A lot of the leftist tactics are based on them, you know, being the majority in power. It's not a lot of Leninist strategies in the modern left because, you know, they've pretty much been the hegemon for about 100 years, right?
Well, I mean, it does depend on how you define left or right. I guess the Saul Alinsky tactics would have been some of the
exactly
some of the ones that you could use. Can you just like check up a Wikipedia articles on rules for radicals, so maybe we could look at the rules because I've forgotten them.
It's been a while since I read that book actually. I read it when I was studying. I remember. This was a weird period for me where I read Rules for Radicals and I listened to Richard Wolff just to try to get the economist Richard Wolff, just to try to get sort of the leftist perspective on things. And it was very weird because, like, I would agree with a lot of the analysis and then disagree with the with the proposals, which now looking at it with sort of like a post political view, or I suppose a dissident right view, it makes a lot more sense.
Yes, okay, I mean Richard Wolff is like, I mean he is like an actual borderline tanky, but he just markets himself as being pro workplace democracies, right? It's kind of the same as like Vosh and. Yeah. At least I think that's how Vosh started out, just talking about workplace democracies as if that's going to solve anything. But I mean, of course, it's just bullshit. They want the entire like communist stack, but they just play this sort of game where it's like, yeah, you know, oh well, communism is like, oh, communism is when this or that happens, like this joke, like communism is when you have authoritarian rulers, or communism is when there's a speaker yelling at you or something, or.
Yeah, and then you get anarcho-communism.
That's kind of the ha ha ha. And of course, didn't you know that communism is only workplace democracies? You know the definition of
it's Mad Max and Burning Man, but you know.
Now I remember his joke. It's like, yeah, communism is when government does stuff, and the more the government does, the more communist it is, or something. That's the joke, right? But yeah. I mean, if you look at the definitions of, say, like at least socialism, right, in Europe, it means government taking over industry and government taking over more of the kind of welfare programs. I mean, that's most of these serious socialist parties. That's what they run on.
Yeah,
so it's no joke. I don't understand.
The labor parties in Europe.
Yes, exactly. Like the social democrats, or even if you go further left, that it's still what they're going to run on. It's like, okay, we're going to take over industries and we're going to tax people more, and we're going to take stuff away from the private sector. So it's like making this kind of ironic eye-rolling joke that, oh, socialism is when government does. Well, it is in real life, maybe not in this kind of like terminally online internet sphere where like Vosh lives and where they only talk about workplace democracies. I've never heard any socialist party in Norway talk about workplace democracies. I've never heard it mentioned a single
No,
time.
worker
It's only
co-ops and yeah.
it's only like this co-op stuff. It only exists in this kind of like fucking Hakeem Vosh, Richard Wolff sphere. That's the only
It's
place I've
yeah,
actually
so
heard of
far
it. And
it seems like only a an academic proposal.
yes, and they get
uh,
to sort of roll their
but
eyes and
Richard
pretend
Wolff
like
was
this is
always
obvious.
glad to point out, worker co-op sort of projects around the U.S., but considering that I haven't heard about any of them making a lot of money, I'm going to assume that they don't really take off.
Well, yeah, they will talk about, say, Mondragon or something. That's the kind of Spanish Basque area where they have like this very large co-op cooperation. But of
Exactly.
course, like people like purists like Chomsky will just start complaining because even though it's a co-op, it's still subject to like the broader market forces, and then they have to they can't set all the premises by themselves, so it's not like a true workers co-op. And of course, this is not like a uniquely left-wing thing either. Like distributism,
It
as
also
commonly
flies
understood,
in the
would
face
imply
of
something like that.
yeah, it
Sorry.
also flies in the face of a obviously right wingers will disagree with this, but it flies in the face of the idea that these things are hierarchical by nature, which is I would assume is one of our core views.
Yes, but of course, like with Mondragon, they are hierarchical. Like you have like a hierarchical structure, but there is more, formalized voting going on, and there's certain like upper and lower limits to salaries uh, and such. So it's not like a pure direct democracy, but it is,
Oh, no.
as you would say, a little bit closer to that than a standard American Fortune 500
Yeah, yeah.
corporation.
Real quick here, before we go into the rules. I mean, this is I guess we're on a tangent of a tangent here. But Bo Gruntman, for 50 Swedish kroner, asks, what's your views on Christianity? Are you a Christian? You want to go first, or should I?
Yeah, I can go first. I mean, we had I think it's in like the first Longhouse episode we go on a bit of a tangent about Christianity, and we sort of end up at the same place. I mean, I'm not a Christian, and I'm not going to try to like Jordan Peterson my way into Christianity, even though I am very sympathetic to like the Christian worldview, and wanted to, even like with my daughter was baptized last week, so I would like try to have her be influenced in a sense by Christian values, but in terms of like believing in a kind of literal resurrection, uh, the dogmas that you actually need to believe to be Christian. I don't believe those things, right? Even though I'm sympathetic to Christian values and understand the influence Christianity has had on Western civilization as it exists currently, I don't believe in the correct dogmas. And unlike Jordan Peterson, I'm not going to try to like bullshit myself to say that that makes I'm Christian because I have I worship like the highest value of all values, that is like the longest survivability of the hero's journey in the Bible, or some nonsense like that. I mean, I think you're a Christian if you believe that Jesus Christ is God and that he came to the earth to be sacrificed and then he was resurrected and went back up to heaven. That's it's like Christianity in a sense. That's it's kind of a yes or no question. It's not really something that you can sit and do. Well, that depends on what you mean by God, and that depends on what you mean by Jesus. It's very straightforward in my view.
Right. Um, I'm a little bit different. I think the result is the same. I like to joke that having sort of have had my frame had my view on religion reframed through Jordan Peterson have made me a lot more open to it, and I feel that reading more and more of the perennialists have sort of put me on a path that's going to lead me to, if not Christianity, religion, right? In some form. And I don't know how long that journey's going to take. And I'm not sure if Christianity, as I said, is the place I'm going to end up, because I do have a difficulty reconciling the Christian faith with the cultural echoes, I suppose, that I feel from the Norse culture here, without getting too vargy. There's something about my biospirit, to use a word, that disagrees with whatever the Christians are selling. Um, but it's not that I'd see them as an enemy at any point, right? Okay, that was a tangent, and there's even more questions coming in. Do we want to do the rules of power? I've forgotten the
sure.
original question here. Strategies that we can copy from the left, right? So the first rule is that power is not only what you have, but what your enemy thinks you have. Any comments on this?
I don't see why we can't copy this principle. It seems to be quite universal. I mean,
I think that's something that we already do through like meme warfare, pretty much.
yes, I mean it's not to be underestimated. I do think a lot of people in the progressive left thinks that the right wing is a lot more powerful than it is because of these sort of spooks that they have in the back of their head about these kind of goose stepping armies that are just going to come around the corner. So all these incels that will just instantly organize themselves. So it's internally we of course kind of understood that we don't really have any of that power, but it's I don't know if that's something that can be played up to our advantage or not. But I think that of course if you are in the weak position you have to bluff, right? You're gonna have to bluff yourself to victory. You can't just concede to the enemy that you're on bottom. So
never go outside the expertise of your people. I mean, that's something I think that we've internalized pretty well. I think through the great work that a lot of people like Jay Green River does, where it's about recruiting people with skill sets where they feel like they can contribute to building parallelism. But maybe I'm interpreting this wrong. It's been a while.
yeah, I mean, I'm looking at. I need to read at least 2 and 3 together here, and what I'm thinking about then is like the let's say like the 1960s leftist cultural revolution, where for the trad, the post-war conservatives, conservatism is all about economics and like the gold standard and all of this kind of stuff, like low taxes, and they just went straight into the area of like sexual liberation and all of this
Right.
like identity politics stuff, and it's very much outside of the comfort zone and the expertise of what the old guard could even understand.
And you
I think the
see it.
left is like really good at this, like say with the trans stuff and all this kind of stuff that's coming up now. I think part of the reason why it's coming through is because some of the people in the institutions who might be slightly conservative don't even understand how this stuff works. They just see it as sort of like innocuous, and they allow it to get passed through.
But I think that's also why, I mean, the regime, quote unquote, has been quite inept at meme warfare online compared to the right, and especially the dissident right is exceptionally good at sort of the modern form of propagandizing, and that's certainly something that I think covers both of these rules.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it would be it's an interesting perspective to take. It would be nice to see if there's some expertise, like some areas maybe outside of meme warfare, where the right could just take some ground. Like whether it's just like some stupid stuff like local infrastructure policy or something like that, where people could just come in and start making decisions that are under the surface actually somewhat political, but on the surface it doesn't look like it.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Let's quickly move on here so that we don't waste too much time on the first question. Make the enemy live up to his own book of rules. That is impossible with leftists.
Yeah,
because
they
they don't
write
play
the
by
rules, right? I mean, they change the rules all the time.
Yeah.
So it's just it's not possible with them. I mean, they're just not buying it. This only works with from left to right. So this one we cannot use. I mean, just harking back to the last stream where I sat and talked about what makes let's say Hank Hill such a good like comedic protagonist, or at least sort of a comedic straight man, is that you kind of always know what he believes in.
Yeah, he's consistent.
He's consistent. He has like a stable base of values. With like, it's very hard to do this the other way with some kind of leftist character, because you don't know what they believe in. They seem to change their beliefs very frequently, and they constantly update what they believe in. So I didn't mention this.
Why the modern online I want to say right adjacent critics sort of just spurg out about it's just the character has just been turned into a mouthpiece for the writer. Well, I mean, that's what leftists do, right? They just insert the new updated political thing, and now the Little Mermaid is black, and Captain America is talking about LGBT stuff, right?
Exactly, and I forgot to mention this the last time on the stream. But Mike Judge, like one of his least popular cartoon shows that only ran for one season, was called The Good Family. That was supposed to be like this inversion of King of the Hill, where they follow some California-based like liberal family. But it only ran for one season. It was very unsuccessful because it actually tried, kind of the premise of like we're gonna have like fun with like a leftist family, and it's just not
Right,
funny
right.
at all. And it was made in
It's not possible.
2009, right?
Yeah,
And a lot of the stuff that was considered like this is leftist dogma in 2009, well, that's like hate speech now. You have one of these characters that's white that's walking around with this sort of African garb and this sort of like stuff, and well, that's appropriation now. And a lot of this the stuff that they're saying and doing, that's like that's so like last year's leftist talking points. Now it's completely changed. They have sort of a focus on health and the focus on like deep environmentalism, growing their own foods, eating healthy, and so on. Well, now that's like eating healthy is like fascism now for the left, right? They want fat, diseased bodies, and that's what they want to promote. So it's not funny. It wasn't funny in 2009. It's not. It's even less funny now with the kind of
yeah.
updated leftist talking points.
I had a line when we were arguing the other day that I kind of enjoyed, where I said that it was something about along the lines of, ideally one day a normie will wake up and he'll realize that he hasn't seen a fat black woman on TV in like decades, and that's sort of the win criteria in a sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd think that, but it's not the only problem. I mean, I think
Of course
Norwegian
not,
TV has
but
been
in
yeah.
the culture war side of it, when I'm talking about like the actual media that is produced.
But yeah, in that sense, I mean, Norway is a little bit more idyllic because I don't see as many fat black women on TV. I think we're at a
It's
sort of
very
deficit.
interesting, the times I happen to watch TV with commercials these days, that you'll have side by side Norwegian uh, advertisements and or commercials, and international ones like say H&M, right? And it's so jarring to go from this Norwegian commercial where pretty much every person in it, 9 times out of 10, is like all white standard family, right? Father, mother, two kids, etc. And then just a harsh cut into like the diversity rainbow mandated commercial where like everyone is not white, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just so glad I don't watch TV, to be honest. You
Yeah,
only get a glimpse of it when
same.
you visit boomers and so on.
Yep, yep.
Let's see, I mean, number 5 here, ridicule is a man's most potent weapon. There's no defense. It is almost impossible to counterattack ridicule. Also, it
And that's
infuriates
the
the opposition, who
entire
then react
problem
to your
of the Biden
advantage.
regime. So, I mean, that's certainly a tactic. It's not a very powerful tactic when the opponent really like actually doesn't care, right? When the opponent has already won, it's not very, it's not that potent. I think it's more potent in a debate. I think that's where uh, Alinsky intended it, sort of in debates or in like
Well, I think
newspaper articles.
so some of the meme culture is like this. Been able to, ridicule them quite a bit, and of course, it depends on how seriously your enemy takes themselves, right? If the enemy is Hank Hill, like if some George Bush Jr. or this kind of like old school Republican establishment, this is a little bit more powerful than when it is now. Although it's quite easy to make fun of the sitting like Democrat establishment in the United States.
Right.
But I mean, I think we get some out of this one. See, number 6, a good tactic is one your people enjoy. Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
no objections there.
I mean,
See,
it's an easy one to tick off. A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. I'd say that's maybe in a weird way, that's sort of like why neocons are are out of the not out of the loop, but why they've sort of been left behind, because they haven't changed their message in like 40 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the left are the real racists, or you just have the
Exactly.
same talking points. Then they every year they work a little bit less than they did previously. So the left understands this. They keep updating their talking points, or they've gotten worse at it, but so it's something to pay attention to.
Keep the pressure on is obvious. I mean, what is it when you find when you got to plunge the bayonet uh,
keep
where
poking.
it's weak? Yeah.
No,
The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. That is
always
something
is.
that the leftists are very good at. The problem is that the right doesn't have the same bite. Like they can't threaten society with anything. The left can
Yeah,
threaten, you know, and they continually do. Obviously, threaten with racist and mid-century Germanism. Um, but the right really have been saying for decades that, hey, this LGBTQ stuff is going to go out of it's going to go off the rails at some point, and no one's listened.
yep. No, exactly.
So this doesn't work when your opponent doesn't really live in the same reality as you do, because they
I
don't
agree.
perceive it as a threat. The major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition. That is very true, I think, and that is, it takes time building these things.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
don't think we
that's
have anything like that currently.
no,
It
but
seems like
it's
the yeah,
it's slowly building, but it's going to take time, right?
yes,
If you push a negative hard and deep enough, it will break into its counter side. This is based on the principle that every positive has its negative. Trying to remember back to his examples here.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's too bad. It's been a long time since I
Yeah.
glanced over this book. So
Maybe someone in the chat can help us refresh what he means by this. In the sense that the say like the Satanic Panic made board games cool. Is that the idea?
yeah, perhaps.
Maybe someone in chat can help us out. We'll go
Yes.
to number 12. The price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. I mean, that is
I'm
obviously
like
the
really
what
blanking
comes
out.
after clear them out, right?
I hope so. But I'm really blanking out on a lot of these. I hope there would be a slightly better list in terms of doing leftist tactics. I hope the audience is
Might
not
be able to find it.
too disappointed. But I mean, I personally do believe that we can have success with incrementalism, but I mean, we just kind of lack the organization and the power. Currently, I just don't see. I just don't see any good reasons not to. I don't have any kind of metaphysical baggage that sort of tells me that we're in this kind of cycle of history and it's just going to go to shit anyway. So you're just going to go to the hut in the woods and try to ride out the tiger and so on. I mean, I understand the concept. I just don't like when it comes to like the day-to-day operations. I don't think about those things at all. I don't know about you.
Right. No, I don't. But it's more on the this is a long process. It's going to take time to build up this basically a social movement that's going to be able to push back against these things. And anyone who's listening to this who expects this to be done, by by the end of 2020 is uh, probably got another thing coming. I mean, we're talking decades here, I think. Unless things get so bad that society is willing to accept any alternative.
Yes,
But
but
I do sort of see that as an you can't plan for chaos.
but I think we have a lot of stuff on our side. I mean, I don't have the exact same sort of perspective on right left as Moldberg has, but a lot of the I think a lot more right wing stuff will come to the surface when people get poorer, as they're doing currently, and the sort of big global machine is struggling to maintain itself
Right.
because of like some of it's like the self-imposed climate stuff, and others, it's like the problems with the supply lines and all of the chaos that's been created in these last 2 years. It's really difficult to kind of maintain a global hegemony in the same way, and the energy is just not there. So I think there will be a sort of retraction where it's possible to win back some more right wing sentiments, but it's not necessarily going to be comfortable. I mean, it might actually be painful. I think a lot of people are hoping for these, like this kind of gladiator, Elysian Field type, trad wife ending. I think it will just be more like people are just poorer and have to look to alternatives, and that just
Yeah,
inevitably
yeah.
makes things more traditional, or at least closer to that, and people just kind of forget about a lot of this dumb, social issues that they are currently so obsessed with.
No, I do sort of, hopefully that will be the, well, non-violent is the wrong way of putting it, but the slow and steady way out of it, right? That you'll get some sort of gradual self-correction. But it's hard to say. And having a backbone of a social movement of friends, FREENs, of course, it's going to make it a lot easier for us, at least. All right, I think
Yes.
we'll go to another question.
Yeah, or we could start looking at some of the pre-planned topics if nothing comes up.
There's a lot of questions.
Oh, okay.
Or we can talk about tomboy abs because Leo asked about that.
Yeah, okay. We'll talk about when we get to his question, and we'll just go to the ab stuff.
Okay, so first we have let's see here. Ooh, this is a tough question. How much do you bench?
You mean like the PR or now? Because I haven't been in the gym for
Yeah,
like 10 years.
that's gonna be the same for me as well because it's I'm gonna cope here and say that my bench press was really bad for a long time because when I was 18 or something, I broke my collarbone in a really bad way to the point where I had to have like a plate embedded into my collarbone to keep it in place, which meant that doing bench presses and shoulder presses was for a long time very uncomfortable and damaging to me. So I focused on other stuff, and then like 7 years later, I started to be able to actually do those exercises. And I think my personal best in benching can't have been much more than like my actual weight. So maybe something around like the 90 to 100 range. I think if I were to like do it now, I could probably get like 80. But even to this day, doing bench presses sort of hurts my collarbone in a strange way, or like the
Yeah.
muscles around it.
Yeah, I mean, my best bench was when I was doing the dirty bulk at 19 years old. When I weighed like 120 kilograms, but I could bench like 3 plates. I think that's 315 or something, 140 kilograms. I
Right,
mean,
right.
I was fat as shit at the time, but I mean, I had this almost this mentality of if you've seen the show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? They have this arc with the character Mac where he just like I have to cultivate mass, bro, and he's just like he keeps just getting fatter and fatter. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
I just
if
had
I
this
were
sort
to
of
like actually go to the gym right now and do like exercises, I probably couldn't have like if I were to do like more than just one press, right? I'd had to drop down to something like
yeah,
40 or
I think it's the
50.
same for me. I could probably be maybe 180 now. I imagine
Yeah. Yeah.
that maybe with like a little bit of a
I'm gonna
bounce, you
start
could do
working on
some
it
more.
again. It's just over COVID, I just started running more because we moved and now I live so much closer to the forest where it's like graveled paths where I can run and then run into the forest itself, which I found a lot more fun. But I do really do want to get back to more weightlifting in a more serious sense, probably this winter, since I mean I can't really go outside.
Yes, I mean I've gotten a bit of a sort of strained relationship to weightlifting to the point where I just keep like, especially now that I'm more of a quote unquote an adult and I have to pay all my own bills and provide for my own food and so on. I look at like weightlifting a little bit differently because the point when I was the strongest was either when I was living with my parents and my mother cooked all my food, or I was living in like this little small apartment. And I just ate whatever I wanted, and I just didn't have to mind, cleaning or, I didn't think about economics in the same way. I just got like a sort of standard student stipend, and and lifted. But now it's like, okay, I have to
I
spend
lived on like
time.
chicken and rice for
Yeah,
like 4 months straight. I
but
did like meal prep and everything, and I shot up real good like in the first, and then I tapered off slowly.
so, but now it's like I mean, I think it's exhausting to do for one thing. I think it's very kind of repetitive and boring. And I know that if I start putting on weight, then I'm gonna have to maintain that just eating more calories, which I mean, it's that I have to pay more money for it. So I feel like it's just like this cycle where okay, you can get a little bit bigger and you can show off your muscles, but for what exactly? I mean, it doesn't help me do my job any better. I'm already married, like with kids. So it's just
Well,
like
I
this
was
hobby
very
where
glad that I spent my youth lifting more weights when I, got married and started, the wife telling me to carry like 200 kilos of dirt around the property because she's going to do some flower stuff, right? Keeping that strength has been good, and I want to keep that up. I'm not doing it for any competitions, right?
no, I see what you mean, but I mean, it just for me, it's just something that I have to. Yeah, it is something that you have to cultivate, and it takes time to do. Because I don't want to just buy a gym membership and then just go like once a month or something. It's very easy to
No,
fall
I
into
mean at
that
that point you're just
pattern.
throwing money away.
Yeah, and it's so easy with like this workout stuff. And I mean, I don't know if this is something the audience is interested in, but I was planning on doing like a stream on like pro bodybuilding in the future.
Yeah,
Uh, and
because
just
that's
like
that's a weird, because that's, when I'm talking about like I like weightlifting, I'm not thinking about, I like the exercise of it, but I feel like bodybuilding, as much as I'm gonna just get called out by by the bodybuilders, it just feels like it at some point it tips over into like an excess that it almost feels like it's redirected masculine energy that could be used for something greater if we weren't living in the current times, right?
yeah, I mean, of course, it is something that's extremely excessive, but I think that people who are in that, I mean, we talk about alternate communities. People who are in the bodybuilding community, statistically, they're very likely to lean more right, or at least right libertarian in terms of their politics. Like, surprisingly, injecting yourself with like horse amounts of testosterone makes you more right wing for some reason. But
Right.
yeah, no, I mean, it's a sort of interesting world to look at, both in the kind of how weird the entire sport is, to the people who are involved in it, to the kind of drug regimens, to how these people actually are able to finance their kind of idiotic lifestyles, to the story of like the IFBB with like the Jewish Weider brothers, how they were able to sort of build up this and monopolize the fitness industry almost, and what it is currently, because you're getting this problem where I mean, you have the people who are just like these hardcore fans who just want to see more and more muscle, uh, and they're also thinking about trying to have some mainstream appeal, and this is always like a big conflict within these fitness industries. When this is a nice segue to get into like the female ab stuff maybe later,
Or
but
well, yeah, let's do
the,
that because that was a question.
yeah, the stuff that's like the line between actual aesthetic that can appeal to a normie and shit that's just totally gross that only appeals to like this kind of niche gym goers and homosexual fetishists.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna copy because you took an image of, I think it was Academic Agent responding to an image, but I can't be bothered to find the original image of the woman who's been making the rounds. Um,
I think we had someone telegram like posted a screenshot you could just
well, I'm
put
just
on.
gonna use yours because you sent something to me, so it's just gonna be like a tweet of a tweet, but I mean it's gonna make the point. So it's this image here, and the contention here, as was with the tomboy abs in the first place, was the simping that's going on in the comments here, and I think you and I disagree a bit on this, because I fail to see how drooling over a woman like this is in any way acceptable. That doesn't mean that you can't have a fit wife, but it's the act of, in the sexual relationship, submitting yourself to a woman that I disagree
Yeah,
with.
I see. I don't know. There are many ways to sort of approach this, and I mean, I can't like try to defend all of these like anime drooler people, but I say, I mean, if you look at this woman in particular, I mean, sort of aside from some like vague notion to some abstract, let's say, the archetypal feminine within like the Julius Evola framework or this New Age framework. You sort of you look at some traits that you look for in a woman like this. I think this is actually a very pretty woman. Let's say you just cut off the body, right, and you just look at her face from the top up. She's
she
very
is pretty. I don't doubt that.
Yeah,
and that's sort of the contention here. It's not that on a physical level this can't be attractive, but it's the relationship that the only way I can see it working out is if you're taller and more and stronger than her.
But
then it's okay.
because a lot of these bodybuilders, like with these Instagram bodybuilders, tends to do a lot to sort of enhance how they look, and in reality, they're imagine like this woman is like 5'3", right? Which is like 162 centimeters, right? In that measurement system. So she's sort of petite, but she has like the big muscles. Maybe she's like a wrestler or like a power lifter or something like that, and she likes to go to the gym. So I mean, she does have like soft features in a sense, like unlike you see with a lot of these female bodybuilders where they will inject testosterone.
Yeah, those who are very extreme look very warped.
So as like a type of side effect from doing testosterone, they will have acne, for instance, where the skin will sort of bluster up with pimples, and you can see that on her back. But like with this woman, there seems to be no, I mean, maybe it's Photoshop. There seems to be no impurities with the skin. The skin is very soft and very clear.
Probably just a filter on her.
Yeah, it might be, but let's just pretend it isn't, right? So yeah, I think she's sort of aesthetically, from like a genetic point, pretty to look at. She hasn't developed any sort of male, what do you call like male phenotype, male traits in the face. There's no kind of
no, aside from like the muscle, which I think is too overblown for what is
But it might be
shape.
let's say I mean it's something like if you saw her outside of the light, she wouldn't actually be that large.
Fair enough.
Let's say
she
would.
Let me use another example, right?
But I mean that's kind of I mean it's just trying to finish the point here because I'm a little bit scatterbrained on this. But the way that I see it, like men will kind of try to, because of their need to reproduce and the kind of their constant sort of desire to reproduce, they will try to hedge their bets as much as possible. That's sort of my view on this. So I think it was Gavin McGinnis who said that he thinks that he has like a thing for brunettes because he was never able to get a blonde, right? He was not popular enough. So they might like start out liking some kind of like traditional woman, but they have very little success and they start looking into these niches and developing tastes for like various sort of niches of women eventually, until you get to say they love really large women or women like strange traits or strange lifestyles, maybe like a lot of tattoos or.
Oh, I have an image. Hang on. Here you go.
Yes. Perfect. We have Mark Collette there with his
Do you want a mid-century German dommy mommy chat? I think the rule should be that you ought to be taller than your wife if possible, but my wife has said that to me. If I wasn't taller than her, we wouldn't be together, and I completely agree. And she's on the taller end of women. I mean,
but yeah, I mean, you have a lot of short kings out there, right? I don't know how tall Mark Collette is.
Yeah, but
like,
I mean, I can still call it out for being degeneracy, and this is degeneracy, and this is degeneracy. I mean, I don't see the problem.
But what do you do? What do you do if you're like Tom Cruise? If you're like 5'3" or something, and who do you date?
Hang on,
at that sense, do you just kind of become trans?
No, hang on, because look at this, right? This was the meme I posted trying to bait out like who's the tomboy abs enjoyers on my channel. And I mean, first of all, this text here is hilarious.
But I laughed.
This as a relationship is sort of on the surface completely fine. I don't mind that a short man and a blonde tall woman is together, right? The problem would be that if the problem is the submission part. The problem is the metaphysics of allowing the woman to overpower you. Even in the sexual fantasy, this 4chan user is writing here, the man is actually dominating the woman, right?
Yes. No, I think
And
we can agree.
that is the issue with this, because it breeds sort of a class of men who's just, uh, submitting themselves to women.
But what if you're like a regular guy who's just into like muscles on girls?
Well, then you're a degenerate. But I mean, you're still going to exist. It's like with the LGBTQ stuff. I mean, society as a whole is positively served by the baseline being don't do this, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. But I mean, like, my one argument is that there are sort of ways you can look at this where it's not, about like the female just
Sure.
dominating
And
the
I said,
woman, or just like this kind of
if this
sub dom
woman were
thing.
to
But
date like a guy who's taller and stronger than her, then
well, let's.
it would be a healthy relationship.
But what if he's like taller and skinny or something, or taller, kind of like schlubby?
Then I think that would not be a healthy relationship, and it shouldn't be condoned.
Yeah, you're making it tough for this chick, right? But maybe she's done it to
Yeah, well,
herself.
she's made it tough for herself.
I think she might, but maybe she's
No
into
one
like
told her to
fat
go
men or
like
something.
take
Right?
steroids and work out. I mean, no woman has to do this to get a man.
Let's see. Did we get a comment? Was it?
Oh, I just misclicked. Sorry.
Yeah, it's no problem. But I mean, the way that I look at it, like I'm just continuing the thread, like with men's kind of sexual hedging of desires. I think this is, men like muscles, right? I think this is sort of a universal thing. They like looking at muscles. They like sort of what do you call myron? That's the term. Like we have the C's. The reason that you have this.
You just wanna date like a bro. That's why you're into tomboys. Is the meme, right?
Yeah, but that's, I mean, that's it's almost like, I feel that's like 60-70% of what this the fitness community is all about, just like oogling physiques.
Yeah.
There's not that
Yeah.
much effort actually being put into it. They just want, oh damn, look at that, check that stuff out. And like, I think that's where you get the fascination with women like this, because it's like, okay, you have a woman that has female features. She's not ruined her face, or she still has like the hips and the legs and the softness and so on, but she also has like the muscles put on. So it's like two things that shouldn't be together, but it's two things that you like put into one, right?
Sure.
I think that's it's kind of the same thing that why there's so much of this kind of futa porn, or this thing. We're getting into sort of uncomfortable territory, right? But it's I remember reading this study where they looked at like this sort of large meta study on pornography consumption, where they looked at sort of traits that aroused men, right? And it seems like a lot of very straight men seem to be aroused by penises, and not just like male physiques, but just the penis in itself. And everything else is like, okay, breasts, female asses, female feet,
So you like
and
morph
female
it into
faces.
some sort of
So
demonic.
yeah, so you're just, okay, we're just gonna take
We're
everything
just
that we
gonna
like.
put
That's where you
everything
get
in.
you get this sort of
Your
she-male stuff,
brain's
right?
like monkey brain gets overloaded with
Yeah,
sexual
exactly. I
desire.
mean, but
Yeah.
that's kind of where some of this porn. That's why I think some of this kind of like futa stuff is so
I mean, if that breeds
prevalent.
this kind of action and this kind of woman and this kind of subculture, I mean, don't stop. We have to go back.
Yeah, we have to go back, but like this is like the second point that I wanted to go. I think actually people in our spheres are sort of more prone to this kind of stuff than in other spheres. And I don't know if you agree with that, even though this sort of like, AA can go out and sort of condemn this. But you look at stuff like this, yeah, like with Mark Collette here, and the interests that people in our spheres have that are quite extreme in multiple areas, and there's no reason that's not going to spill over into sexual urges and so on. I mean, I think we have like more, trans people per capita, probably more homosexuals per capita than you have in like some regular progressive political party. You disagree?
Yeah. Oh,
So
and that's the thing. I don't mind, wanting to create the perfect, 2.5 meter tall Hyperborean offspring because you managed to land in Amazon. I mean, that's great, right?
yes, the Valkyrie.
But as long as as long as you're the man, right? You got to be the man, and you're not the
Yeah, no,
man when
I
you're
agree.
simping for some muscle
I
girl
agree.
on Twitter.
I don't endorse simping. But I just, you have to, you kind of appreciate some of the diversity, especially when it's like white women, right? Yeah. It sounds
Sure.
it sounds absolutely bizarre, but I feel like, especially like within these spheres, within sort of AA, they're just gonna have like this niche thing that they're gonna knock on or bully at that point. But I mean, he has open homosexuals on his show. He has like transvestites in his sphere. It's like, yeah, okay, you're gonna accept that stuff, but you're gonna draw the line at this. Like, okay, female bodybuilders, we're not gonna do. That's like too degenerate for us. But we're not gonna.
What's the? I suppose
we're gonna allow everything
it's the
else.
practicality. Right? It comes down to friend-enemy distinction, and
well, yeah, it kind of does. But we need. I guess we need to have more female bodybuilders in the DR, right? We'll
right.
It's the Hyperborean mommy
sorely lacking
accounts. I mean, but it's a little bit like the stuff, say, like with Jordan Peterson, where he had this video where no, it's not a video. He had a tweet where he was condemning some plus size model. I think her name was Yumi Nu or something. Do you remember that? Where he had to like close his Twitter account because he
Yumi Nu.
Yeah, Yumi Nu Jordan Peterson. You could Google that, and he talks about like this is gross.
Oh
this
yeah,
like,
it's the fupa sling woman.
Yes, but where he was like, yeah, sorry, no amount of totalitarian tolerance will make this attractive. And I mean, of course, you could sit and grandstand about
there it is, the fupa
about
sling.
this, yeah. Because it's in grandstand about how you think this is disgusting. It's against the conservative ideal, but like his right hand man is an open homosexual who uses surrogacy, right? And which he's sort of which he has endorsed,
it's weird. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, unless you're willing to, I mean, I'm not trying to say this sort of whataboutism stuff. I just think it's kind of a weird place to draw the line if you kind of accept if you think you're an enlightened conservative, because you accept like this sort of conservative homosexuals that use surrogacy and basically like a baby factory, then I don't know what you gain from drawing the line at like fat chicks or something,
We all have, blind spots, and I think some of it could be a lot of this is sort of British. They're either British or they're of British heritage, and the British are very... I remember watching like a video where someone pointed it out, like accidentally, where the British political theory and its practice doesn't mesh. Like what their ruling documents, such like the Magna Carta, etc., doesn't map to the reality that the Brits are living through in terms of what their monarch and their parliament does, right? Because they're a practical people. They don't really care about the theory. Not to say that they don't write theory, but they're much more inclined to sort of like deal with the stuff as it comes, right? Which means that they're a lot more prone to sort of just go by the friend-enemy distinction.
Well, I guess it makes sense, but they're also principled, I think, in many ways. These sort of Anglo countries are less corrupt than many other countries.
Compared to something like Germans, I mean, they're a lot more practically oriented. So they allow for a lot more leeway if that sort of allows them to just navigate the chaos of the world, right?
Yeah, I'll buy it. But I think that it's a sort of good segue if you want to go into the sort of ideology versus pragmatism question, or there's some other interesting questions in the chats.
There's a lot of questions in the chat, so it's really up to you. There's a guy asking, I wonder if China attacks Taiwan, is it time for World War III? I mean, something's going to start, because the US has explicitly said that if you guys attack Taiwan, then, we're sending the cruisers.
Yes. I mean, it's very hard to fight the war on two fronts. If I was like leading China, I would just go for it. I mean, you're seeing like they're just kind of exhausting themselves economically with this Ukraine stuff. So you could.
Well, are they though? I mean, because they still have the carriers in the area, right? At all times, it's still going to be a hell of a battle.
Yes, I mean, I'm no geopolitics guy, so I'm glad I'm not. Don't take my advice on this. It'll probably be a bad outcome. I assume they have good reasons for doing what they're doing, but
right.
I assume that there will be some point where maybe the people will look at the United States just getting, breaking down slowly, and people just come and try to take chunks out of it.
At some point, I mean, China has everything to gain by waiting, by playing the long game here. So, Monopathalmos asks, what are you currently reading? What is next in line?
Well, I tried to actually finish, James Burnham, the Managerial Revolution. I also got some books on my desk that are just like, I'll sometimes go to these these sort of phone booths, or these places where people just leave the books that they can't sell and try to pick something
Yeah,
up. And I found something that was interesting, like this book by David Rothkopf. It's called The Super Class. Of course, it seems dated as hell now. It came out in 2008, where he just talks about, hey guys, did you know that international money power is actually more powerful than local national governments? But it seems to be quite thorough in
weird,
its
huh?
documentation on how how these things, like how this kind of international money power is able to affect policy on a national level. But of course, it comes from it's more of this kind of shit-lib
Yes.
perspective, right? It's not going to be based, but I think it's good to read some of these books once in a while. You just get a slightly different perspective on things.
Yeah,
How about you? What are
it's
you
nice.
reading?
I recently finished Artivism, which was a short book that I bought from Alexander Adams at the event. Very interesting. I talked to you a bit about it, where it feels like art, not necessarily the bureaucracy of art, but art in general is one of the spheres where the right actually has some power to punch back. Mostly because it's very clear that the regime as it currently is incapable of producing good art. Uh, so it's an interesting perspective, albeit it might feel a bit sort of, for someone who's heavy into, or have been heavy into Moldbug black pilling stuff. It feels very like some boomers trying to fight the system from within the system. But I feel like Alexander Adams is both willing and able to do it. It's him.
Yeah, it sounds cool. I'd never heard of Alexander Adams before the Shieldings event, actually, but I'm glad I did. He was very well
Yeah, he
articulate
was
and knowledgeable
one
about
of
his
the
field.
better,
Yeah.
yeah, one of the better speakers there. Up next, I'm not sure. Um, it's between diving back into the metaphysics of power by Evola, because I never really read that, like, because it's mostly essays, right? I never read that like cover to cover. I just pulled out essays when I felt like I needed it. Um, or I haven't read Pan by Hamsun, which might be required if I'm going to be continually referring to his writings. Otherwise, I have I don't have my list here, but I do have a list somewhere of like stuff I want to read.
Yeah, I mean, there's always enough books. It's almost like video games on Steam or something. You just keep
Right.
piling them up, and you don't get
I
to play any
try.
of them. Right?
It's so easy to buy books before you're actually ready to read them, so I try as hard as I can to uh, to not do that. To actually just finish a book and then purchase the next one. Oh yeah, I'm also reading. That's a short one. I bought at the Shieldings event. The Why I'm Not a Liberal by Bowden. That's like a short essay, basically. So I finished reading that.
Yeah, it sounds good. Book discipline
Yeah.
is quite important because they're harder to get rid of than to acquire. That's for sure.
I'm gonna do some. I'm gonna hoist up a question here that Jay Burden just asked, because I might want him to qualify it a bit. Do you think that there is a disconnect between what the right says and revealed preference, especially on economic lines? I'm not quite sure what you're getting at with economic lines. Do you mean sort of like, oh, I hate Unilever, but I have to buy their products? Is that what we're talking, or
Can you repeat the question? I don't know if it came up. I think I misunderstood it actually.
do you think that there is a disconnect between what the right says and revealed preference, especially on
Well, yeah,
economic
certainly,
lines?
certainly on like
I mean, I
every
know
point.
there is, but there's going to be with anything, because we're all children, children of the ashes. I mean, uh, I can sit here and say that you shouldn't play video games, but I do play video games from time to time. It's
Yeah, and I think it's one of the worst points is the convenience over authenticity point, right? Didn't talk about
Exactly.
localism, like you're talking about the preserving the local culture, gardening, homesteading, and so on. But in the end, 9 out of 10 times, I just choose convenience. I'm just going to choose whatever's the most efficient.
I'll out myself
Yeah.
actually. Something I did today, which is I caved in because we need the space in our garage for storing the tires that we don't use during winter. So instead of storing them there and changing them by myself, I drove them to this like workshop where they change the tires and they keep them for you until the springtime. So I don't have to they don't have to take up space in my garage, and I can use the storage for other stuff, which is
Yes.
like, and something that in our circles would be like, oh, you got to change your own tires, which I know how to do. I've done many times with both on my own and with my dad, but in this specific circumstance, it's just the convenience of paying someone else to sort of paying myself out of the issue is something that I valued more because I can focus on other stuff. And that's something that I'd say would be a disconnect between what something that I would advocate, right, and something that I do. But
Yes.
that
I
being
mean,
said, if I lived in a society where this wasn't an option, I'd deal with it, right?
yeah, I think we all would. The question is that this is one of the reasons that I harp on the point of like first worldism and third worldism, because I think so many people on the DR have like third worldist ideologies, but I'm not sure you're ready to live in a third worldist country. To be honest, I think a lot of you would end up regretting it if you won. That's sort of the intuition that I get, is that let's say by some stroke of magic that you're able to succeed and get the sort of grim, dark nationalist isolationist government that you wanted, and we get to more of this kind of third world situation, and you have to do everything yourself, and you're poor and you're kind of hungry and cold. And I mean, you're probably gonna think back on, the kind of neoliberal world order as like, that was pretty good actually. It wasn't that bad. I don't know if you feel the same
It's
way.
it's
I'm not
it's
trying to
about
shit on people, but
identifying the material comforts you would be willing to give up, right? And the more you can identify and the faster you can identify and the stronger you will be, I think,
yeah, I
without
think,
sounding too much of like a Buddhist or something.
yeah, no, I mean, it's just that I don't think people appreciate exactly how difficult a lot of things would be. In a sense, like a lot of things that they take for granted to work just would not work,
But
and
yeah, and
I
it's
think
it's
the
sort of
attitudes also of people like in a poorer country would be significantly different. Like I think generosity would actually be, at least in a period, would get a lot worse. People would be more stingy, more aggressive about money. I mean, I'm noticing it now.
yeah,
With the electricity getting more expensive and
I agree.
interest rates going up and so on. Like people are they're invoicing me for stupid shit, and they're arguing about every little thing that when I ask for money for something, they're and this didn't happen a couple of years ago. Like I could invoice people, or I could ask for money for collective projects. On the place that I live and so on, in the apartment complex, I could say that I wanted to paint the walls or change tubings or something, and people would just give me the money. And now it's like, yeah, well, I sure would need that, and it sounds expensive, even though it's like necessarily maintenance. So I mean, like that,
And
okay,
it's
that's the
sort of
world you're entering.
a downside of the sort of sphere and the masculinity in it. I called it in a tweet. I called it based peacocking in um, air quotes, which I think is the act when you sort of you say something or you make a statement and then some reply guy for lack of a better word comes out of the woodwork to sort of like show off how much more based and esoteric he is because uh insert something that is totally not a viable sort of actual livable solution would be much cooler. And it's like, yeah, but you've sort of just entered the conversation and shot yourself in the head for the spectacle of it, right?
Yeah, and it's not just for us. I think about, if you look at other groups as sort of client groups, I think there are a lot of people who sympathize with right wing conservative sentiments, but I think they're very worried when they look at a lot of these very third world attitudes, that there's a lack of competency in the right wing in terms of actually trying to run a country. And I don't think they're wrong, honestly. Like, this is one of the things that I wish would be better. It's like they could actually look at people, these parties that are on the right wing, and say that, we're secure that these people could run the country. I mean, it sounds weird to say competently, but there is something to like these centrist or these kind of center right parties where they seem to be good at understanding the levers of power and how they can work fluently.
Party
Like they
has
talked about, say,
successfully
someone with
infiltrated
yeah.
the online dissident right and is now working hard to pull us towards the center.
Well, I do not want to pull us toward the center, but I want us to be able to like do the work the machine the way they work the machine, instead of
For
just
sure. I'm just
trying to
I'm just
be
teasing you.
more based than the other guy by just like, no, I'm not gonna have a heater in my house, and I'm gonna do like fucking cryotherapy for 6 months or something. How about just figuring out how to do effective
Prologue
governments?
Sholmes has a question here, which I think is a bit interesting, mostly because it's something that I would like to highlight because he asks, "Is there any major topics where you disagree with academic agent?" Um,
Oh, what a convenient
well,
question. We could get right
what is his
into.
major topics? I mean, we have a couple probably. We talked about something earlier this week, didn't we?
Well, I mean, that's the at least for me, the latest video that he released. I mean, not the latest one now, but the against ideology video. That's sort of
Right.
what we were planning to talk on. But at least for me, I
Yeah,
sort of find myself
I'm more of a
disagreeing on it.
semi disagree there because it depends on what level you're looking at the problem. I tend to think that what's the stuff that Jordan Peterson says, you have like high resolution and low resolution, and the low resolution would be the level where the myth of the ruling elite is sort of propagated. But the high resolution, the down to earth, what actually happens in the day to day operations is purely Machiavellian or Italian elitist, in my view.
Well, so like
So
when
it
Jordan
feels
Peterson
like
explains
he
this,
is shaking off the need for ideology, which I feel is weird. And so I think that the problem is that with this discussion is that there's two levels to this, and someone like AA is talking on level one, while everyone else is talking on level two, or not everyone else, but half the people are talking on level two, and the other half is talking on level one. Because I
yeah,
feel like both of these things can be true at the same time. Like the divine right of kings can be a societal myth that is the framework that forms the hierarchy of the Middle Ages, and Charlemagne doesn't have to give a shit about it. You know, both of these things can be true at the same time.
yeah, no, I think I see what you mean. Like when Jordan Peterson explains this, and he makes the pyramid with his fingers, and he like flutters them around to show like he's talking about layers or
Yeah, yeah,
meaning and so on. I mean, my criticism is not really rooted in anything with layers, but as far as I understood his argument with against ideology, he basically says that ideology is just kind of post hoc rationalizations for power maintaining itself or power expanding itself. I think that's a sort of fair
yeah,
assessment of what he said in that video, and like
yeah.
that leads eventually to why we're going to have like clear them out as the kind of negative vision for the dissident right, because ideology doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's just like post hoc rationalizations. So I mean, like the first criticism that I have is that he basically says, okay, it's you talk about the elite that exist, right? The elite that already have power, and that their decisions to maintain power, expand power, are always going to be just they have to coat it in ideology in a sense, but it never really makes sense because the ultimate goal is just to maintain and preserve. But the thing is that that's when you already have power, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so we don't have power, and my view of ideology is that I don't understand how you're supposed to get power without ideology, because as elite theory says,
And
the most
that would be my
yeah.
criticism as well. I think it is ignoring the. I tried to tweet at him with this, but I didn't get a chance to really go into it with him. Where by doing that, he also ignores which is why I want to reread Metaphysics of Power. He ignores the metaphysics of power, the creation of that myth, right? Because both of these things can happen at the same time.
Yes, and I mean, just to continue on my point there, as elite theory tells us, like the organized are the most powerful. The better you're organized, the more power you're going to have, and ideology is a tool of organization. So if you're not going to have any type of ideology, then what else are you going to use to organize other than, I guess, just some kind of hierarchical leadership or just using computer technology in a sense? Like, I mean, a part of, say, the communists' ability to organize is in the fact that they have a shared ideology that gives them a framework for understanding a historical context. It allows them to create strategies. It allows them to justify and give them authority to justify certain actions that they're going to do toward others and so on. I mean, let's say at the Schildings event, after Evelyn had done the propaganda, the sort of speech on propaganda, and you had people in the hall doing the Q&A asking if, like, is propaganda ethical or not, and then we're getting into this discussion if propaganda is ethical. I mean, if you have a proper ideological framework, then you don't have to ask those questions. I mean, you can just refer to what Karl Marx
Fair.
said in his manifesto, or what it says in the Bible, or what it says in this book or whatever. I mean, let's say you're a jihadi. Well, we have this thing called taqiyya, right, that justifies us doing this to the non-Muslims, and we don't have to have this discussion because this has already been decided within the ideological framework, and we don't have to keep reminding people over and over again what we have to do because we all share the same ideology, and therefore authority can be justified through that and not through
In a
basically just
weird
force,
sense,
right?
you could then make the argument that because the mid-century Germans and the Italians didn't have a strong ideological core outside of, our policy is simple, we wish to rule Italy, um, is why those nations were able to be subverted so heavily post-war.
Well, I
That's
do
just a
actually.
weird, like, crackpot theory I just, had.
But I do think there was more to fascism than just we want to rule, right? It is ideology is more than just like book
Yeah, no,
stuff.
the movement in general, yeah, sure.
I mean, I don't know how exactly you're supposed to even understand what you're supposed to do with that ideology. Let's say you have a group of nationalists that are organized, and nationalism is their ideology. Well, that allows them to understand, okay, there is such a thing as a nation that is really more than anything that I can see empirically. Like, it is like this kind of subjective, this construct that is a nation, and there's a people that belong in this nation, and that's something, and there are borders, and that's something more than I can just see with my eyes and in my ears, and that we can just talk about as facts. But it's something that we believe, that's metaphysical, that we believe in, and we think
Yeah,
it's
and it
valuable.
it comes down to sort of like a core philosophical chicken and egg sort of situation. Are you an ideology first person or a a, realism first person, right?
Yeah, but like, give me the other scenario where you have people with no power who get together and they just build power. I mean, I don't see how that happens other than, like, these people are just complete, sort of psychopaths, and there are
Exactly.
no reason why the society that they will produce will be any better than what we have now. Like, you just get in a new bunch of people who are only interested in power and maintaining their own power. Like, why would that be more based? Like, why would that be any less corrupt or any
Yeah,
better
yeah.
in any sense than what we have
And
now? We
and
might
and
as well just
again,
let these people rule.
that's where my core disagreement would be, is that, tossing away one of them um is foolish when both of these things can run, concurrently. You can build the ideology and the power at the same time.
So, like, my second problem with the all ideology and all ideas are just
Currently
kind of
maybe isn't the right word.
post hoc
Sorry.
justifications, is that it ends up being, I don't know if it's called begging the question, or it's kind of like Freudian psychology, in a sense that Freudian psychology says that everything is basically suppressed sexual desire, right? And even my ability to refute Freudianism is like repressed sexual desire. So even if I try to refute the idea of everything being post hoc power rationalizations, my attempt to refute that is also kind of my post hoc
Yeah, Freud has
rationalization
just
for
inserted
trying to
himself
exert
as God.
power, right?
Yeah.
It's that's another problem, and my third problem is that you can see I mean, when I look at the people who have power, and of course the sort of disagreement about who has the most power and who are like the real elites. When you look
Money
at the stuff that
power or the yeah.
they've been doing like for the last 3 years, that all of these choices are just okay. We're just trying to expand our own power. We're just trying to get more power. And this has like nothing to do with their ideological convictions, yet they all seem to be doing very different things based on like
Well, I
the
think
type of
that
ideological
comes down
grounding that
to
they
how
have.
you separate the camps, right? I mean, if we recall back to the Shieldings event, I mean, this isn't one coherent unit. You have multiple sort of camps of power nodes or interests, right? And some of these people are purely ideological, and some of these people are purely realist and or elitist, and that's why you can, the real power is probably the one that's realist because it's able to shed the ideological aspects of the regime at will. Um,
Yes,
Tony
but they of
Blair,
course they have to
which is
quote
the
that in
ever
ideology.
returning. Hang on, let me just finish.
Yep.
Tony Blair, who's always sort of the returning villain, right? In the AA arguments, is on record for saying that all of this stuff a lot of this LGBT stuff needs to return, right? It needs to scale down
Yeah,
because
I
the
mean,
realism of it is.
you could sell me the idea that Tony Blair is a sort of pure pragmatist, but even within Tony Blair, he has to grow up in a certain setting that have where ideology is prevalent, right? I mean, there are
Sure,
assumptions
but
within
I
his.
mean, his ideology is the social democracy, uh, liberal world order, where he is the king of Europe, right?
Yes, even though
No,
there's
I'm
very
not
little.
joking. Like
Yeah.
he was gunning for the EU. What's it called? The chancellor. Um, quite a few years back. So I see that as he might be a true believer in that. He's a true believer in him being at the top of this order.
Yeah. No,
And then
especially, I
everything will
mean,
be
I can.
fantastic because it's the liberal world order and everything is democracy and happy times, right?
Yes, but I can certainly understand that power lens when you look at Tony Blair because he understands very well how
But that's
power
what I'm
works.
saying as well. These things can exist at the same time, right? The divine right of kings is the fact that the king is on top, and Charlemagne says that that's me, right?
Yes.
It's it's these things. It's not first comes the power, then the ideology. It forms together. And if you don't have the ideology, you won't have the metaphysics of power behind you that's going to help you grab the power.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I understand at least. But okay, just to have like a finishing point then, where of course I could watch the against ideology video and see that it has a sort of coherence to itself, but then you go and watch another academic agent video where he will beat people over the head because they're not conforming to like the sort of Evolian view of capital T tradition. But I don't understand how you synthesize the sort of metaphysics of the perennial traditionalism uh, of Evola with this kind of realist everything is power perspective. I think they're sort of radically
It's an
different.
Italian view and a British view that's trying to mesh. I'd say
Yeah,
it's a continental view. Yeah,
yes, but it just I don't see how these things can coexist. I mean, either you try to just attain more power and show your sentiment, or there is like this higher metaphysical truth that you need to attain, which means that it's not just sentiment or post hoc justifications of power. There is an actual hard truth that is sort of underneath all of this. Underneath sort of all of the bickering. I mean, that goes back to the
yeah,
tomboy
yeah, yeah.
abs and all of these other things. Is that it's bad because it doesn't conform to the capital T tradition, right? But there's no reason to even do these videos about trying to insult one group in the audience that are into abs or something. I mean, if you're just thinking about power, you should probably not do that, right? You should probably not try to insult your own audience by saying that they're degenerates, because that's going to make you less powerful. It will not make you stronger. Like, I mean, flattery helps, but insults are probably just going to make you more isolated.
Right. I think we'll move on to next question here. I'm gonna bring back Jay Bird and clarify it a bit. He says basically we want low immigration and family formation, but we don't want lower standards of life, which is I think we understood his question then. But I've always said that I'm willing to forego avocados and strange vegetables in my stores if it means that we're not going to have any immigration, right? So it's about identifying what you're willing to give up, really.
Yeah, certainly. But of course, I think it'll be more than avocados. It might just
Yeah,
be
of course.
foregoing.
It's just
Yeah,
I'm saying it a bit tongue in cheek. It's going to be a bit harsher than that, but I'm willing to go quite far.
yeah. I mean, it'll
Okay.
be interesting to test. So yeah, next question.
Bu- 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 Advice for dealing with leftists shitlib BS in university, specifically heritage studies from Daniel Nilsson.
Whoa.
Don't engage. I think you're not going to win. I just rolled my eyes at it and found friends that were, right wing like myself, pretty much when I was in university. Maybe I was lucky because I ended up hanging out with guys that were basically already either accelerationists or third positionists.
Well, I guess it's easier if you do some STEM stuff, but this guy's doing heritage studies. I mean, I do like send a salute out to our brothers in the humanities, right? You're really taking the
Fair enough.
blows
Yeah,
there for the
I
rest
did
of us.
STEM and I didn't encounter bullshit until like year 2.5 when I had to take some random philosophy class, right? And then
Yes. The
one of the
question is,
professors
I
was a
guess
total leftist.
the only kind of like surface level tips I could give is to ask. I mean, do you have to attend all classes? I mean, if it's not mandatory, you should probably just emphasize trying to read the material instead of having to always just attending these lectures, and then making sure that maybe you have some other outlet in your life for like your other impulses for different kinds of politics. Maybe you should go like in some trade martial arts or something. Meet some other people where you can talk about other stuff, so you don't go crazy sitting with these kind of like lefty loonies at uni.
Yeah, yeah. Find yourself some anchors. I guess that's the best thing I can say. Devuno Triforce says industrial society and its future question mark. Are you asking if we've read the manifesto? I'm
Uh,
not sure.
yeah, I
Opinions on
read the
it?
manifesto, but of course it's I mean that's the funny thing about like my name and the entire sort of image of the avatar and so on. I'm not really like a third worldist. I think Ted Kaczynski is a lot more sort of third world. I mean, if you want to talk about like real third worldism, that's like this sort of Anne Prim stuff, right? I'm more of like a neo Luddite where I'm have like a healthy skepticism towards technology, and I'm not a techno optimist like you see a lot of these people who with like high
Oh, yeah.
positions in our society. So
Best way to organize without being subverted. I think we've covered some of that already. But it has to be parallelism in the first round, and I do agree with Green River that it's going to come in the form of a social movement that's going to have to build over time. I don't know what you think.
well, you have to gatekeep, right? It's like
Oh
kind of
yeah, that as well.
weed the garden, right? You just
Yeah,
you have to actually look at people and be honest with yourself about the people you're bringing into the movement, right? When you bring someone in, if they
exactly. Yeah.
are a subversive influence or not, and not be afraid of trying to remove them, while at the same time you don't want it just to become like this kind of hug box with three people who agree with each other on everything. So I mean, it's a difficult balancing act. I think it requires a lot of
Oh yeah, certainly.
maturity in leadership.
Bu- 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 bu. Burkarl with obscure history questions, I think. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to answer that. Can't watch
I
right
doubt
now,
it.
but I wanted to quickly ask for your opinion on which way to divide the Kola Peninsula in the future. Yeah, no, you're not going to get anything useful out of me on that. I'm sorry, dude. What's your window reviews, interviews, Thomas? What's your opinions on the Republic of Ireland? Well, they provided a lot of good raiding territory in the in the 1800s. I guess that's my my opinion on Ireland.
Well, yeah, I think it's an interesting country. Where I mean, originally I just had the impression that okay, yeah, the hard drinkers, and they're like on the side. You have like the IRA terrorism and so on. But I do realize that there's a lot more to Ireland. That when you focus on the drinking stuff, you think about them as degenerates, but they also had like a very strong kind of conservative Catholic tradition, probably stronger than a lot of other countries, and they have the capability to live like very modest lives in a sense, that are a lot more authentic, I think, from a right wing perspective than many people give them credit for.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, they're usually beaten as the N words of Europe, or at least of the British Isles. But I don't know enough about Irish people to make a judgment, unfortunately.
I've never been there. It's just you learn a little bit here, a little bit there, and yeah, I think they're underrated, honestly.
Nell06 asks, what do you think about the Portuguese and the Mediterranean people? Um,
Well, I mean,
well,
Mediterranean. What does that cover exactly? I
yeah,
mean,
well, I mean, you're going to be. That's a bit of a different. I do like Mediterranean culture on a personal level, not in the sense that I'm high on the Nordic autism. Like I hate that no trains run on time in Italy, for example. But um, I do enjoy. I mean, it's a very interesting perspective, or very interesting culture, sort of to contrast with Northern Europe, and I think they have they've certainly earned their place, right? Um, and also, if you're going to visit France, the southern part where that touches the Mediterranean is the only part of France with tolerable people, pretty much, and that's saying, I'm stretching it quite a bit considering French people.
well, yeah, I mean, I've known Portuguese people, exchange students, and colleagues in like larger corporations. I've never met one that I didn't like. So I have a very good relationship to Portuguese people.
They're very different from
Yeah,
us in many ways, but I've never not gotten along with someone, either someone living here, or me visiting Spain or France or Italy or Greece, right?
yes, but I mean, that's kind of all I know is that I've gotten along with all of them. I know that they have like very liberal drug laws, as far as I understand, and a lot of people are trying to get out of their country, which is, I mean, it's what you see with like Spain and a lot of these countries where the economy seems to be a little bit stagnant and the birth rates are low and so on.
Yeah,
So
it's
if you have some kind of degree or something, they try to get out somewhere else if you're relatively young and uh, educated. It's sad, but that's what it seems like to me.
yeah. It certainly, considering the legacy of the Mediterranean culture, it seems to have fallen a bit, right?
Yes, I mean we talk about how like bad the birth rate problem is here, but it seems to be even worse in like Greece and Spain and these in those countries.
Hmm. Glow in the Dark asks, what is the ideal female ratio to males? I'm gonna assume like population 1 to 1. Everyone gets a wife. That's my
Forced
government
monogamy,
mandated
yeah.
wife. Yeah.
Arranged marriages. Yeah, it's
Sorry.
it's just the lottery, and then you have to just deal with what you get.
I don't know
But
what the ideal is. I mean, it's considering that there will ever be a free market, a free sexual market. It's never going to be a 1 to 1. Obviously, it's going to be the hypergamy is very real.
well, I mean,
Things like
for
Tinder has just made it even worse, right? Because it just means that instead of it being like one man to every, let's say, 5 women, it's one man to like every 15 woman, right?
yeah, exactly, and of course those it's like this sort of Pareto thing where it's just a few top men who are able to spin a lot of plates if there's no kind of regulation and there's no social expectation. But I know that like for the boomer generation, there was a higher ratio of women to men, right? And that's when you got like this kind of sexual liberation culture, where like
Yeah.
the most of the men would be able to get laid in that culture because there's just too many
Mhm.
women for
Because
each
they all
man, and you
died in
don't.
World War One
Yeah,
and Two.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And you don't have the same technology and the same tech infrastructure to kind of like just everybody meets the same man, and they can organize that stuff. So I mean, from just like this hedonist perspective, they had it pretty good. And like with us, it seems differently. There seems to be more men to women, and so it's more of a seller's market in a sense. It's a rough. It's
Ted
it's a tough
Kuczynski
it's
in
it's
the
a tough
chat says,
world.
says we need to get rid of Tinder. My actually get rid of social media in general. It'll solve so many problems. It's going to solve, the Tinder problem. It's going to solve, the Zoomers all being deracinated and suicidal. It's going to solve a lot of the environmental issues because we won't have data centers like keeping your shitty posts forever. So they're not going to draw like gigawatts of power. It's so many birds with one stone, just shutting down the social medias.
Yes, I mean, I'd like to either just everybody just goes back to using email, or you have some Chinese solution where like the government just like, okay, you just have one chat app that you can use. That's like this boring text app. There's no emojis, no anything. You just
If
you can
Yeah,
just write
cyberpunk
text to
is
other
onto
people.
it. We got to go back to the old Usenet forum days. That's the way. Um, Galileo asks, "Have you already talked about political strategy?" Yes, and it's sort of been weaving in and out over the past hour, I'd say, hour and a half. Um, I'll quickly highlight this from Speedrunner. He asks, "Favorite '80s action film?"
I'm not American, so I can't give it immediately. I noticed that this is like this very American thing where they'll ask, what's your favorite song from the '70s, or what's your favorite movie, like favorite romance movie, and they always have an answer immediately. But of course, I certainly have watched a lot of them, and the
I'll
easy thing would be just to answer Die Hard, right? But
I was yeah that was going to be mine because it honestly is mostly because it's the one sort of my dad pushed on me, so it's got sort of uh, that nostalgia feeling. um
I changed my answer. It's Bloodsport, actually.
yeah, that's pretty good too. I mean, if the Mad Max movies count, which one is the one that came out in the 80s? I guess they all did. Well, no, I googled. Yeah, the first one came in 1979, so maybe Mad Max would count as well.
Should
Which
we
is
check
both of
check
these are
out the
probably
list?
very basic videos. All right. Um, that's related to something we've already answered, so I'm going to skip that. I have another question here. There was one guy in Element who asked about the same guy who asked us how much we benched. Asked us about our opinion on the water wars, which is interesting because I haven't thought, I've been aware of what the concept is, but I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. Do you have any hot takes on the water wars?
Can you explain to me what it is? Is it just what it
Uh,
sounds like? That
it's potential future wars over water supplies. I assume that's what he's asking about.
yeah, sorry, I don't have anything intelligent to say. I'm keeping my eyes open. That's all.
I mean, it's certainly a resource that could be the cause for wars in future. I'm sorry we can't go any deeper than that, but as much as we're basically almost
Prepared
warring
to yeah,
over
prepared to do the
gas
bear.
prices
I'm
now,
prepared to
right?
do the bear grill strategy. What's that? You just
Yeah,
drink
yeah,
your own piss
right.
to survive.
But maybe we'll be able to do like a deep dive, get some of the other guys on and have a deep dive into the water wars at some point in the future. Vingle, before he left, asked, "What do you think of his assertion, that public transport is intended to humiliate and degrade?"
This is all public transport, or is it some specific public transport?
That's interesting because you'd think, like, I think a lot of Dissident Right guys would think the trams are aesthetic, right? The old tram cars or trains, right? There's a lot of train people
Yes,
in the
I think
Diosphere.
if you're an American, I can understand this perspective, having lived in America for a little bit. That you think that buses just exist as a form of like degradation for people, because that's kind of what they are. I mean, I felt like physically scared most of the time I had to take a bus in the United States, and like the car is basically the way to go. But if you have like a functional, big city with a good city planning and good infrastructure, and you can have trams and buses, double decker buses and stuff, I think you could have a good time, and it would be sort of a wholesome thing. I don't see it as like something that has to be degrading.
Well, is the idea that it's sort of like a weird like I'm not sure I'm getting the angle here. Maybe Vingle can expand on it in a comment or something. I'm not sure where the humiliation angle comes from. Is it because of the lack of a car? Is it because you have to, you're going to be crammed in there with so many other people because we've built this sort of metropolis where you don't have a choice? I think you're onto something, but I'd like to see you expand it, Vingle.
Yeah, I mean, now it's like the way it is in Oslo, you'd think that like the car is the humiliation vehicle and not the other way around.
Certainly, and it's one of those things where, as with many other things, it would be fine if you lived in a high trust society, right? If you lived in a stable high trust society, this wouldn't be a problem, where people showed manners and then blast rap music on the subway. Um, Next question. Do we have any more questions? Yes, we have a couple of questions. Keep the questions coming, guys. We're nearing the end of the pool here. What is your opinion on this is the Sesti Car asks, what is your opinion on Full Metal Alchemist, manga or either anime?
I watched both of the animes. I didn't read the manga, so I guess like Brotherhood is a little bit faster paced. I mean, I like both of them. Brother is a little bit faster paced, a little bit more exciting and dynamic. But I actually like the other one, like just the straight Full Metal Alchemist, because the story was more elaborate, and I found it more satisfying as a sort of long term watching experience. How about you? Have your wife forced you to watch it or something?
Actually, yeah, she was like, "You might like Full Metal Alchemist." Was one of the things she recommended to me when like she introduced me to anime again, and we watched like one or two episodes, and I had to tell her like it feels like I'm too old for this. This just feels like a children's cartoon, and maybe just watch 1,000 episodes and then it gets really good. But I feel like I have better stuff to do with my time.
Yeah, I'm not above watching kids shows as long as they're not anti-white or paused.
Fair enough. Um. Ed Krasinski says, which form of self development is most important? Mental, spiritual, or physical? And if they're all equally important, can they all be done at once without getting exhausted? That's a very good assessment or a good question, Ted, because I think it harkens a bit back to the self improvement stream we did many episodes ago, where you can sort of overdose on the self improvement culture itself, um, losing sight of the thing you're actually supposed to be gaining from the self improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to address the question a little bit more directly, I think that you have to look at it almost as a pyramid. That it's very hard to do any mental self development if you're physically like complete crap, if you're eating badly and you're in pain constantly, or like you have some diseases or something like that. You ought to try to fix up the body, and then you could try to work on more mental stuff, and from there you could try to have some spiritual attainment. But I
The
agree with like,
Maslow
yeah,
pyramid.
but I agree
Yeah,
with like I agree with you that self improvement is not impossible, but it is actually very difficult, and I think it's a lot more limited than people believe. It's so easy to try to trick yourself into thinking that you're improving, right? You have these people who go on these sort of Tony Robbins self-improvement circuits, right? It's like they go to concerts. They keep going back to this sort of like you create your own life and universe, and you're going to improve yourself and be a titan inside your own soul and so on. And I mean, nothing is happening in their lives. They're just living the same kind of shitty lives with their 9 to 5 jobs and so on. And but they sort of feel like they're having improvements because they feel good when they read the books and they go to the seminars and
Yeah.
so on. With
You
our
can you
friend,
can
like,
lose yourself in optimizing yourself, right?
but the thing is that they're not actually optimizing themselves. Like they feel like they are, but they have no, they don't actually have an objective metric to measure it. So they just keep doing stuff that feels like self improvement. It's like our friend Sam Harris. He will keep bringing up this sort of, oh well, I did this type of meditation, and after I did this meditation, I feel so much better, and I become a much better person. I took a course on not telling lies, and I've become a better person. And like if you took a drink for every time he says he's become a better person, you just pass out eventually. But then you see, like, he'll just do this trigonometry interview. He talks about, I don't care about dead children as long as Trump is out of office. And he is just kind of a piece of shit. There's been no real self-improvement there, actually, but he sort of feels like he's just constantly doing all these sort of courses and yoga and stuff, and that's making him better. But in real life, like, you have to actually work on something concrete and measure how you're doing. You can't just like do stuff that makes you feel good and then say that I've improved, because it's just not true.
Yeah. It's something that I wouldn't advise, if you're like, oh, I'm going to do self-development, right? Which is weird because you don't really usually think about it in that sense, but try not to do everything at once. And try to have a bit of a minimum viable product approach to it. Make a goal of reading one chapter this week, right? And then sort of expand on it until you can get to the point where you can read a book a week, right? And do the same with your body, and you can do that at the same time. But if you try to do everything at once, you're just gonna flounder, right?
Yeah, it's very easy to just fall
You're
back.
gonna
Like,
burn out, or you're gonna break pretty much.
yeah, 100%.
Um, which is how I started. I was just like, okay, I have some of these like heavier economics books or something like that, and I just told myself, all right, I'm gonna, this week I'm just gonna read a chapter. That's it, right? That's my goal. If I read two, that's good, but I'm gonna read one, and I, set time to read that chapter. And in the beginning, it was a lot slower than it is now. But now I find myself reading books more, for the enjoyment of it, right?
Yes, I mean
And
that's
for
the
the
only
learning, obviously.
it's the only approach that's worked with me as well. It's like incremental improvement. Never been able to do crash diets or anything like that. And I think it's also important to remember that depending on what station you are in life, there's sort of limits to how much you can quote unquote improve yourself. I mean, if you are like a sort of regular family man with a 9 to 5 job at the post office, like how much are you going to self improve? It's almost counterproductive to some point. Like you're just going to keep getting a better bench press or
Yeah,
being
you can
better at
always work out more and eat less, but
you know
uh,
getting a six
there is
pack
a cap
or yeah,
usually. Yeah. Hmm.
or like trying to be more persuasive or looking better or like but what's the point? It's not going to make you a better father. It's not going to make you better at your job at the post office or anything. So like it's I mean, you try to improve for what you're actually supposed to be doing and not for some general idea of like I just want to be a better version of myself. You try to be a better postman or a better dad or something. It's not it goes back to the Sam Harris stuff again with these people who just keep like telling themselves that they're just improving constantly. But you got to ask yourself, like, what are you improving for? What are you actually trying to do?
Yeah, I don't, I don't know. Right. That's why I'm saying I don't go to the gym to you know be a bodybuilder. I do it because I want to be strong for my family, right? For the things that need to be done. And that's simple. That's a simple enough goal, right? It's not very complex. I want to be able to lift the things I need to lift, right?
Yes, that's an actual attainable goal as well. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds like it's a real
And I
improvement
can
and
gauge
not
it as
just.
well, right? If over COVID, I obviously did less of it because they shut down the gyms for a while. and I could tell, after a couple of months, or at least the first year when it was strict, that this uh, this object that I carried easily a year ago is a bit heavier now. I need to go back to the gym, right? It's very immeasurable. Okay, next question. What makes Norway different from Denmark or Sweden? All I know of Norway is that it was once a part of Sweden. Well, and at one point it was part of Denmark as well. And if you ask someone like Green River, he's going to point to the haplogroups and tell you that southern parts of Norway has always been a part of Denmark, genetically at least.
Yes, I mean, in that sense, we're kind of a people who's always been under a serfdom. I mean, we could say we're independent now, but then we've just kind of been under the thumb of the gay,
Yeah, we have a
for
bit of
quite a
an
long period.
independent streak, but we've never really been independent for quite a while, right? But we're different in a lot of ways. We are a lot less collectivist than the Swedes. We are a lot more tame than the Danes. Like the Danes are a lot more continental in the sense that they'll work themselves to death. The Norwegian is a lot more, take care of your own stuff, and working yourself to death is not the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Norway gets a lot of praise on these development indexes and so on, but it is a certain personality and temperament to it, and if you are the wrong type of person, you will not like it here. I think if you're, like you say, you're sort of a continental person, or you have a certain little bit of a hotter temperament, you like things to go a little bit faster or a little bit more dramatic, and so on. If you're not like shy of conflicts, you might find it suffocating.
He was calling us lazy oil meds. Yeah, I remember. I don't know if I made this joke when I was on Jay Burden's show, but the large, the wide brush story of Norway is pretty much hunter gatherers, Vikings, drunk fishermen, oil, computer scientists, and engineers. That's what we do.
Yeah, it's
That's the meme.
well,
The meme history.
yeah, it's probably accurate. I wish I knew a little bit more detail about the like the middle of the road stuff, like the drunk fisherman era. There's probably a lot more to it
I'm
than that.
joking a bit, but I mean, we are quite an industrious people who are hardworking, but we are a people who tend to keep to ourselves, and I mean that as family units. And I'm not sure how that maps to the others, but we are certainly not like the Swedes, who are a lot more like the continent than we are. And we're certainly not like the Danes, who are a lot more, I want to say industrious again, but in a different way. Anyway, let's, unless you have any final words.
I think you summed it up well.
Yeah. When is the next anime stream from Nordanon? You did have the guy we had on anime stream. He wanted to come back, didn't he?
I've seen him in the comments. I've tried to lure Jason back on again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Might do another
keep
one.
trying, or a third one. Like we had a pretty long list, so hopefully it's coming in the future.
I'm gonna Ultra Radical Centrist has a deep religious question here, which I'm not sure if I'm equipped to answer, to be honest. He says, what do you guys think of the Orthodox concept of symphonia? A Western Catholic equivalent will be integralism. I see. Bring
So
up
do you mean like political integralism, like as a political philosophy? Because I mean, I could probably not even answer that because that's quite foreign to us as Norwegians. I know that that's kind of on the way up in the United States with the Hispanic population, as having like their idea of conservatism being like Catholic integralism. But I don't know if that's what he means or if it's something.
Maybe. I mean, we did have Catholicism briefly in the historical context, but but it's not something that has survived the culture. Uh, or survived until now. So that's very foreign for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Firefox is red, Explorer is blue, Google Plus sucks, and Chrome does too. Says that's a name. I didn't even know you can have that many characters in a name. What do you guys do when you want to enjoy nature? I go into nature. I like hiking.
Yes,
I
I mean
like
I have
skiing.
some forest area, near me, at least not too far away, and I just take hikes. Basically, I'm not like this super
It's very
outdoorsy person.
easy here. I mean, I assume you as well. I mean, there's very few places in Norway, unless you live in a major city, where you can't be sort of in the thick part of a forest within like 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, and that's one of the things that I like about it. Honestly,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's very underrated if you talk about like what makes Norway special. But I mean, you drive around in Norway, you're always close to some sort of thick forest, or you can sort of see it on the horizon.
yeah. And in
Uh,
like an hour, you'll be in pretty much no man's land, right?
exactly, and like for me, it's sort of it's a thing with almost with like mental sanity is that I need to see thick forest to stay sane. If I'm exposed to landscapes where there's like no thick forest and you just have these endless horizons, I feel like it gives me vertigo almost. I don't know if you've had a similar experience. But visiting the United States and just going like traveling close to Oklahoma and Texas and just seeing like these kind of desert fields that just go on and on and on and
Oh
on. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, without any trees.
yeah, it's kind of nauseating. Or being in like New York looking at skyscrapers as you just go up, up, up. I yeah, it makes me a little cuckoo. I wonder if that's like it has the same effect on the people who live there and they just don't understand it.
I don't know. It's an interesting. I haven't had the same effect, but I can understand what you're saying. Great White Lobster says, "How is the fishing industry in Norway? In the northeastern U.S., the GA is trying to see us driven destitute." Well, the lobby for fishermen and the fishing industry, um, what's that called in English? When you like breed fish, basically, in those big tanks.
These
Um,
breeding pens or something.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, both of those industries are very strong, and it's one of the major reasons why we're not in the EU is that we would be subjugated to like strange French fishing laws that would pretty much wreck our economy. Because besides oil, fishing is our largest export.
Yeah,
So
this is true. I don't like to think about it too much because it's like you said, it's all breeding pens, right? It's almost a
yeah.
little bit repulsive. I like the romantic idea of like this guy sitting in the raincoat, pulling in, fish, or like the
I mean,
men
we
going
do
out with
have
the
a lot of
nets,
that
right?
as well, obviously. But yeah, it's more and more industrialized, sadly.
Yes, yeah. I think
But
up in the
it's the
north,
same
just
everywhere. It's the same everywhere. You go to Scotland, you go to to France. I mean, they do it in the same way. Um, uh, we we do maintain the quality, it seems, though, from it. So I hear that from foreigners that the Norwegian salmon brand is still pretty strong.
yeah, I believe it. It's another thing that I like about living here, having lived other places, is the general quality of food that you can get. Even though I think that's on the way down as well, to be honest.
Exactly. Questions coming, guys. We're closing in on the end of the bucket here. Um, and we can probably go for about an hour, right? Maybe half an hour.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. MG asks thoughts on the UK situation. I assume you're talking about Liz Truss, which is absolutely hilarious. First of all, Boris's plan is moving along as expected. He's going to be back anytime soon. Patriots in control. um, it's I don't know. I it feels so weird because it feels almost like there's this weird. I mean, it feels like there's this weird shadow organization, right? That actually wanted someone like Rishi Sunak to be the prime minister, and then something they couldn't control happened, and Liz Truss like floundered herself into the position, right? And someone's pushed a button to sort of just, oh, we need her out. Everyone's just going to turn on her now, right? But I've also seen reports from other Tories writing that she's always been seen as like an incompetent person, that she was going to mess up everything, and we knew that going in. So I don't know what's happening. I don't know how the Conservative Party in general is going to be able to survive this. It's going to take a lot of time before people. I think it's going to take a lot of time before people are going to be able to trust the Tories again after all of this. And this has to be. I don't know. Is there like it's the shortest PM term in history? Is there like a record for that? Did Liz beat it?
I think she did. Yeah, she's. I read some newspaper articles. She's like the shortest sitting prime minister in the history of anything. I feel like I just kind of blinked and she was out. Honestly, it seems like you have more insight into like British politics than me. It's when things happen so fast, I almost kind of lose interest. It's like,
well, this is
okay.
this is too fast, right? I
Yes.
mostly know about this, obviously because when she was instated, that was the week I was on Unpopular Opinions, so I made sure to like devour a lot of extra content about Liz Truss, and I was like, wow, that's barely a month ago, and she's already out. So I've been following the story a bit, just sort of with one eye, right? Trying to see where this is going, and yeah, the cheese is certainly certainly rising. All right. But I think Morgoth and AA is doing a stream on this in like an hour as well. So I mean, MG, if you want thoughts on the UK situation, you're gonna get a lot of thoughts there. Um, Jay Burden says, I find Norwegian accented English to be very clear and pleasant to listen to. Are there accents you guys have a hard time understanding? And you don't, any that I don't like the sound of? Is there any accents we don't like the sound of?
I don't like the sound of Norwegian accents. It
Well, the
sounds
very
stupid, but
stereotypical one, right?
I don't know why, but I just like I hear other people with Norwegian accents, I just like cringe, and it's so weird for me to hear that people say that they like the sound of this accent. I guess it's because it's not enculturated in me that this is a pleasant accent. I've not seen it in movies. Like there's no cool movie characters who sound like that. There's no American celebrities who sound like this. So there's nothing to hang it on other than like corny tourists and people who try to sound international on television.
I've been sadly broken down by having a lot of English education. So my accent is just all over the place. But it's hard. I don't know how I sound to someone like from the US. But I doubt that I sound like the stereotypical.
No, I
accent.
mean I mean, I don't mean Native Americans as in Indians, but the people who have sort of been, white people who's been born and bred in the United States, they have like this very like deep American accent to them, and
yeah,
they don't sound like us at all, and they could, if they're paying attention, they can spot you, even though, let's say I talk to a Japanese person or something, they could maybe they'd think that I was American if I really pushed it, trying to sound that way, but I can't, authentically copy their the accent of, say, someone who's born in California or Texas and so on. Let's see if there's some
obviously
other.
not. If there's any accents I don't like, I really don't like the vocal fry stuff from California, obviously. But I think that's a universal. But any in like Europe, let me think. Like the gypsy accents, I don't like those. But that's more tied to the people speaking than the accent itself.
I don't even remember what that sounds like. But I mean, most accents I actually kind of like. Even though sometimes I think of them more as like a comedic accent. I think they have that in
I don't like
movies where
French accents. Someone clear them out in the chat. French accent. I agree. I do not like the French accent.
Yeah, but I still think it has its place, even just for comedic purposes, right?
Sure. Finkel says, accents don't mean a thing if it ain't got that twang. Yeah. Hate being labeled Russian whenever I speak English. Is that or Portuguese? Well, are you Portuguese? Because a lot of Portuguese sounds vaguely Russian to people who don't speak Portuguese. Strangely enough. Jason says, I think the British accent is too much. That's interesting.
There are many British accents, but I agree there's
There
some that are a little bit
Are you
too
talking
much
about
for me
like
as
the
well.
received pronunciation accent, or
Yeah, maybe like the Cockney British accent I actually don't like. So
you don't like the Cockney?
Yeah.
What about the North?
Well, it's just funny, right? It's difficult to parse out sometimes, but I've come to like the charm, especially after listening to like 10 hours of Morgoth. I just enjoy that now.
Oh yeah, Liverpool accent is horrendous. The give me a fucking chicken and everything. Yeah, I don't like that. The Scouser. Dutch I don't like. I don't like hearing Dutch, but that's hearing the language Dutch. Because hearing for someone from Norway, hearing Dutch when you're not paying attention to it sounds like someone speaking Norwegian to you. Because a lot of the words are similar and the tonality of it is very similar. So if you're like half paying attention, it's like someone speaking Norwegian to you, and you have to like refocus your brain to realize they're actually speaking a different language, and it's very annoying.
It's perfectly put. Exactly. I couldn't put it better myself. I've had that experience many times. Like, what the hell? I know that word. I know this word, but it's kind of like blurry.
Yeah,
it's like you've had.
Am I having a stroke? What is wrong? Let's see here. The Swedes murder your language, apparently, says Jay. Speaking of the Dutch, I think the Dutch influence, the Dutch and the German influence, hasn't been getting enough shit when it comes to what we talked about last week with the sort of conglomerations and mercantilism. They have to take some of the blame because it's certainly not Scandinavian.
Yeah, perhaps.
The Dutchie saying he gets that with Danish. It sounds like Dutch until they start paying attention. Okay, so it goes both ways at least. Burden says Dutch sounds like English underwater. Okay. Ooh. Jorge Puente saying, what type of fish are there in Norway? Well, you're gonna have to get me pull out the lexicon here. But I mean, in terms of the industry, the salmon and the what's the name in English?
Trouts.
Trouts, maybe. I'm not good on translating the names of fish. I'm sorry. Let's see here. If a Dane and a Norwegian both speak perfect English, is it easier for them to talk to each other in their own language or in English? It's a weird thing where, in my experience, every Swede and every Dane I've met tells me that the Norwegian is the only guy who can understand both and pretty much also speak with both in theory. But I would have to, like, when you're speaking to a Dane, you'll have to moderate and toss and spice it with a bit of Danish words. If you're speaking to Swede, you have to, do it the other way. But the Norwegian can understand the Dane, the Norwegian can understand the Swede, but they can't understand each other.
I guess the proof is in the pudding. There's a reason we're speaking English on this show, because we originally imagined this to be like a Scandinavia only show, but we figured out we couldn't even understand each other on the. we had like this kind of cross Scandinavian.
Yeah, it was like
panels,
a two birds with one stone thing where we could sort of break down multiple barriers by just doing it in English. And also, of course, no one understands the Finns because they speak like pseudo Russian. I think we're out of questions unless there's any in the Element chat. So I don't know if did we cover every topic you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, maybe not the new age question. But I mean, if you could bring up the sort of like
Oh yeah,
men praying to women stuff, where I can do even more
This-
shit takes and defend the indefensible positions if you want
yeah,
to.
because this was like an
Uh,
offshoot of our talk about because my stance on this stuff is literally the same thing as the abs stuff. Hang on, bring up the tweet. How do I do this? Percent share. Was this right?
yeah, that's it. Maybe you can zoom in a little bit on this picture, because this is something that appears in like the sort of woke compilation pictures, right? And it's sort of okay. We'll go from the female ab stuff to this. I think in the in a lot of these Twitter threads, to the point like this is sort of emblematic of the same type of issue. But I
To
looked
me,
into the
this is just the
accounts,
same thing.
the account of that guy like Ben Q, right? And he is more of like this alternate, like this sort of new age type guy who works out, and like he's with the he's apparently friends with that guy Awaken with JP, right? And I made this sort of argument that I actually think that these new agers are a lot more adjacent to our spheres than most of these political and cultural spheres. I don't know if you look at this picture, I don't know if you can get the whole picture up, but you see, the reason I don't, even though like it looks completely cringe, I don't think that this is like a standard kind of like registered Democrats ceremony here. Like you look at the women here, they're actually quite attractive, right?
Why are
They're
they
all
crying though?
they're all white, and they're crying as well. So it's not like this sort of typical women is going to dominate men thing. This is going to be one of these more cringy new age kind of we need to forgive the sacred feminine, in a sense. Like we need to the men will collectively ask for forgiveness, and like you see with the woman, like she thinks it's very sincere, like she's very sort of emotionally touched by this
What's the angle here? I'm
experience.
sorry. What's the angle? I've been oppressing you for thousands of years, or is the angle I'm sorry I let you out of the kitchen? Because one of them I
It's a
can
good
understand.
it's a good question, but it's very much like
Because
from
it's
their.
on me that you have to work now, a 9 to 5 job. That's my fault, and I'm sorry, women. We messed up, but I'm not going to apologize for the hierarchy of the home. I refuse.
No, certainly not. But I don't think like especially with these new agers, I think they're much better on like gender roles than not in the sense of this like 1950s like Leave It to Beaver type gender roles, but in the terms, yes, they probably did. Uh, but in the terms of they'll talk about like the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. What's this author's name? Like Jason Data, The Way of the Superior Man. Like they will read this kind of literature that borders on esoteric, like almost Evolan spirituality, even though they get into a lot of this kind of cringy ridiculousness like this. But like in terms of dissident ratings for these people, if you harken back to the AA video where he was sort of like ranking like who's a dissident and who's not a dissident, then he basically said like the sure way to assess a dissident if you're unvaxxed and you're neutral on the Ukraine Russia question. And I think that within this kind of new agey sphere, there's going to be more people who would have checked both of those boxes than you would find in I think almost any other political or spiritual sphere in the Western world currently. And I don't know if you disagree with that, but that's kind of my take on this.
I'm not going to disagree in the sense that I think you're like completely wrong. I just don't see the sort of the value. Like if let's say like 20% of the people who attend something like this is actually, based, quote unquote. But what about I mean, I don't see this as anything but not based, right? This is if this
Well, I
is
mean,
the other 80%,
but look at the
what's the
women though.
point?
They're the women are not fat, right? And they're not like muscle bound. They're perfectly sort of healthy, regular BMI women. They don't look like they have like any type of skin diseases like you see the people who go to these abortion protests. They're able to produce people who are mostly white, who look
Yeah, okay,
and
fair enough.
sound healthy, right? That's sort of what's being produced here, as opposed to like this more bio-Leninist strain of these people with like these kind of disgusting skin diseases who are
Moldbug is
extremely
going to be at the
overweight.
next
And
Coachella. Is that what you're saying?
well, I mean, he might attend something like this. He talked about how like the elites of tomorrow will be attending Burning Man
Yeah,
and
exactly. That's
these
what I'm saying.
and these things.
Well, I see from a strategy point of view, I can understand why you could ally with these people, but it does also require you to be in a position of power where you can drop them when they're no longer useful, right?
And I think that's what we have to do. I mean, that's what the lefts have done. They've allied with people, and they have to drop them when it's not convenient. But I think, like for these people, I mean, if you want to try to find a woman who could actually allow you to play out this more like traditional esoteric masculine role, and who is white and like healthy, maybe a little bit crazy, but I think like these communities are better for that than most of what you're going to find. You know, it's certainly better than universities. It's better than like art clubs or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. It's a strange route, but I mean, I suppose strange bedfellows is the name of the game here.
Yes, I mean that's the problem. Like, when you look at people, I mean, people inside the DR are calling each other cringe, right? So when you look at people who are outside, and say you look at the adjacent things like the evangelical community, or the like this kind of new agey community, or sort of local Muslim community, wherever you will try to find some allies in the fight against the gay. Well, I mean, these communities are just like pure cringe. There's very little to it other than that. So you just have to take it for what it is and see, okay, what do we have in common, and see if you can help each other out. I don't see any other way. You're not going to get further up without finding some allies.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. This picture just makes me feel bad. I think that's like I understand what you're saying. Just whatever's happening on screen here, just
Yeah, it
you
should
know
induce a
leaves
kind
a
of
bad
disgust
taste in my
reaction, I
mouth.
think.
Yeah. So I'm just getting overpowered by the disgust reaction. Yeah.
Well, that it's
Um.
healthy, right? But I guess that's the kind of that's where we get the entertainment from, right? I mean, we can defend the indefensible.
Exactly. Radical centrist, ultra radical centrist says, "What do you think of Norwegian government taking away the kids of Eastern European immigrants for quote unquote abuse? Do they just want to brainwash them? Because they sure don't take kids from Muslims." Well, I mean, I don't know the stats for this, but Rotherham happened, and it could easily happen here as well.
Yes, I mean, I'd like to get more into reading up on the Norwegian child protective services, actually. And I don't know the fact that they don't take kids away from Muslims. It would be interesting to if I had some
Yeah,
data
I'm
on
I'm
that to
getting a
actually
bit
check.
like, are you sure that's true? Because I feel like I've heard about that before, but it might be a case where it happens more for Eastern Europeans, and it might be one of those things where, oh, maybe that's easier because it's more, the optics of
Well,
it is
yeah, the
better.
optics there, it's like white people taking kids away from white people, and I think that they might be more deracinated coming here than say like the Muslim community that's very tightly knit.
Hmm.
It's a bit more of a like a black box where you don't really understand the culture at all, and it's hard
What
to
you
put
see
things
in
into
in the
context.
Muslim communities as well, which have been a huge thing, is sort of the honor killings, right? You don't hear anything until like suddenly a girl turns up dead because it turns out that she wasn't a virgin, and no one knew because no one says anything, right, until the dead body shows up. And that's part of the tightly knit community, right?
Yeah, it's very tightly knit. I think with the Eastern Europeans, they like the kids, will go to school, they'll learn Norwegian quicker than some of these like these brown Muslim kids, and they'll start talking to authority figures about what's going on at the home, and it's a very quick sort of two-step process from that until, okay, well, you're doing what with your kid? Like, you're disciplining your kid in what way? And then they're going to be taken taken away, right? Because there's seems to be very little tolerance for corporal punishment in Norway.
Yes, yes, very. Uh, that being said, it does happen, but not in the cities. Let's put it like that. And it's not like, you're not punching the kid, but like spanking is certainly a thing once you get out of the city.
Well, yeah, I mean, one has to think about it in a way like you're not using your kid as a punching bag, but there are certain ways that you use sort of physical techniques to discipline people. I
Yeah,
mean, it's just
yeah.
like the sort of standard Maslow. No, it's not Maslow. Who's the guy with the bell? The
Yeah.
Pavlov.
It's late.
Pavlov's
Pavlov. Yeah,
Pavlovian conditioning,
yeah,
basically, that you can use if people misbehave or uh, behave in a good way and something. I mean, it's something that would be interesting to do a stream on. Like corporal punishment is a topic that I'm actually interested in, but I'm struggling to find good resources on it that are not just like this shit-lived stuff talking about how horrible everything was in the past. Like like an actual good objective resource that I could read about like the use of corporal punishment in organizations and in schools and so on, because it's something that was just completely normal until it wasn't, and then it just went away
yeah,
because of
yeah.
some laws that were put in campaigns
And now
from
it's the
certain
other way
groups.
around. It's gone too far, according to many. I see it frequently in more, um, conservative papers. Teachers will um, write articles where they talk about how, gangster culture, quote unquote, and disrespect toward the teacher is rampant in a lot of schools, because the teacher literally don't have tools to discipline the kids.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, you need ways of sanctioning and disciplining, and for some people, like speech is not going to be enough, right? Some people just don't give a shit, and they'll come from tougher countries where they're used to physical
Yeah.
punishment, and like it doesn't really matter what you tell them. Like they're only going to respect a certain level of authority and like the stronger man in a sense. I mean, I'm just so glad I don't have one of those jobs. I'll probably quit pretty soon. I'm not interested in like sitting taking shit from kids and knowing that you can't do anything other than just
Yeah,
like
in the
disapprove.
current makeup, I'd never want to be a teacher. All right. Nordanon asks, "What's the best Norwegian dialect?" The correct answer is Northern. This is a very specific Norwegian question. What is your favorite dialect, Bloody Path?
Well, I like the southern Kristiansand dialect for women, at least. I think it's quite
Mm.
attractive.
The soft-spoken Southerners. Yeah, that's my people. Everyone hates the Western one usually. Um, hmm. I do like the Northerners mostly just because the way they speak, and they have a lot more euphemisms than we do. um, that are
Yeah,
explicitly sexual, just built into
it
their language.
has its place, but it unfortunately has like this kind of comedic edge to it, right? Which
It
is
does. It really
I guess it's
does.
good. It's good for breaking the ice, but it's kind of it makes it harder to take them seriously, right? If you want to be intellectual,
Yeah, yeah.
you might have to drop it.
Um, Also, my family is from the western part of the country, so I have a lot of um, Western influence in my dialect. Um, well, not anymore, but I did growing up. Okay. Anyway, I think we're running out of questions. Let me check all. Madeleine Brooks says, "How can there be multiple dialects with just 5 million people?" Well, there's mountains in between every village. That's the answer. It takes like 4 days to meet anyone. So you live in your village and you develop a dialect there, and that becomes very strong. That's why. And that obviously also evolves into identity going forward. So people are very protective of their dialects here. It's something that people will lament if they move away for university. That when they come back, they notice that they've gone soft in their dialect. Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions in the chat, and we don't have any more, we don't have any more. Sorry, don't have any more topics. I can feel my brain power siphoning. um, and I think the best thing would be to just end the show.
Yeah, I think we can keep
You
it
agree?
short and sweet. I think
Yeah.
we covered a lot of good questions and had some interesting talks. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll do the thing in the description below. Is my Twitter, the Longhouse Element channel, which is Discord, just encrypted. If you want to talk with us or fans of the show. There's also a link to the subscribe star for this channel if you would like to support that with a monthly subscription. Or you can follow me on Telegram. That was the last one. I'm so bad at shilling. Telegram is the last one if you want some memes and updates and you don't want to follow me on Twitter. Athletic Path has his own YouTube channel where he posts memes sporadically, I think.
yeah, at least at least the videos. Usually, I like with the community posts, I'll post one per day.
Yeah, those
So I
community
mean,
posts are
it's
great.
at least fun with you have some regular people who are always in the comments, having
Yeah,
a blast. So
I'd recommend checking out his channel. Regardless, the community posts make it worth it. Next week we're doing Nordic History Part 2, which has been a long time coming, and we're going all out. We're gonna have Leo Borealis and Burkhold coming back as last time, and we're also gonna have Green River. So we're gonna go deep into the Viking era of Scandinavia. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week. Have a good night. I think we're having some technical difficulties. It's not letting me end the stream. Are we still live on YouTube?
I need to check. See.
Yeah, we're still live on YouTube. StreamYard isn't letting us stop the stream. You guys are forced to be here. That's a little
Right.
while longer.
Yeah, I'll just leave this on in the background. I have to do some work. So yeah, put on some elevator music, and hopefully we'll be back back in a week.
It's just saying an error occurred. Wait a moment and try again. Maybe I can go through YouTube.
Well, what if you just both leave studio or something, or
I
do you think
don't
that will
know.
work?
I don't know. Hang on. I try to stop it through YouTube. This is a first. Content live stream. No. Create. Go live. It should tell me that I'm live currently. Oh wow, this is confusing. I don't think this is even like a boomer moment. I think something is very wrong. Okay, I'm gonna try to force it.
I can't
Thank
let you do
you all
that,
for
Dave.
watching, and we'll try one more time. Have a good night.